Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're diving into a topic that touches on something we all deal with every single day online, proving who we are. But the ground is shifting, and artificial intelligence isn't just becoming our assistant. It's potentially becoming our actual digital identity.
It's a radical concept, isn't it? I mean, the material you've brought together, drawing on insights from monkeypaws.com, TechCrunch reporting, and even OpenAI's own announcements, it paints this picture of, well, incredible convenience mixed with some pretty profound risks.
Exactly. So think of this deep dive as your shortcut to understanding this landscape. How did we get here? What's the big appeal? What are the new dangers we need to worry about?
And crucially, what questions are still completely unanswered?
Right. The source materials, Ultra TLDR, really nails it. We urgently need safeguards and recovery options built now before this shift is, well, complete.
Because once your identity gets tangled up with AI, getting it back if something goes wrong, that becomes incredibly complex, maybe impossible in some cases.
Let's maybe start by just looking back a bit. How did we get to this point? I mean, it wasn't that long ago that online identity was basically just a username and a password. Remember that?
Oh, yeah. Feels ancient now, doesn't it? Then we got, well, a bit smarter, I guess. Hardware tokens like RSA Secure had popped up back in the 90s.
Right, those little key fobs.
Yeah. And later, SMS codes on our phones made two-factor authentication 2FA much more common. Maybe around the 2010s.
Which felt like a massive security upgrade at the time. Totally changed things.
It did. And then came the convenience play. Single sign-on. Just click a button, log in via Google, Apple, Facebook. Boom, you're in.
Super easy.
Super easy. But what's fascinating is that with each step, while convenience or security may be improved, we also started asking new questions.
Like what?
Well, who holds the keys now? What data are they actually sharing when I click that button? Who's building a profile on me behind the scenes? It wasn't just about verification anymore. It started becoming about control, about data.
Right. And now AI seems ready to take that next leap. And this isn't just checking if you've got the right credentials anymore.
No, not at all.
Think about tools like ChatGPT. They don't just read words, they learn you. They can pick up on your writing style, your quirky phrases, even the underlying sentiment or intent in your messages.
So instead of a static ID like a passport number or a password you type in, we're talking about identity as a kind of living signature. It's dynamic. It's constantly evolving based on how you interact.
We've actually seen precursors to this, haven't we? With behavioral biometrics. Companies have been capturing thousands of subtle interaction points for years.
Oh, yeah. Things like how fast you type, how you move your mouse, even the angle you hold your phone, the rhythm of your swipes when you scroll.
Hesitation patterns, all that subtle stuff.
Exactly. And while that traditionally focused more on the physical interaction with the device, these new AI systems could start layering on language, conversational patterns, how you actually sound or write.
So the line between how you physically use a device and how you communicate through it, that starts to blur significantly.
It really does. It reminds me of that anecdote from the source material about the Visa executive.
Oh, the takeaway shop one.
Yeah. Their favorite takeaway place knew them so well, their usual order, how they like to pay. They didn't need formal ID. They were identified by, lived familiarity, personal nuance, not just credentials.
And AI identity could become like that, but scaled globally, automatically.
Yes, exactly. Identity based on how you are, moment by moment, across every context, every mood.
Which sounds kind of cool, but...
But the scary part, this is where those lines between security, privacy, and, let's be honest, potentially surveillance, they start to become almost invisible. Your password isn't just replaced by a fingerprint. It's replaced by your whole digital persona, analyzed constantly.
Okay, yeah, that does sound a little bit sci-fi, maybe even a bit concerning. But look, in a world drowning in account takeovers and sophisticated fraud, there's got to be a bright side, right? The source material does highlight some potential benefits that are actually pretty significant.
Absolutely. You have to weigh the risks against the problems we have now. When you look at things like that devastating $35 million scam where attackers used a cloned executive voice, deepfake impersonation is a very real, very expensive threat.
And AI identity offers a potential way to fight back against that kind of thing.
Potentially, yes, because it's not just checking a single point of failure like a password or even a voice print in isolation. It's looking at complex, interwoven patterns of behavior.
So the advantages listed are pretty compelling. You could have, say, continuous verification instead of constantly logging in.
Right. The system just kind of knows it's still you. Fraud detection based on tiny shifts in your typical behavior that a human might miss.
Onboarding new services could be seamless, maybe? Fewer forgotten passwords? That alone sounds amazing.
Definitely. And systems could make access decisions in real time based on a kind of confidence level. How sure is the AI that it's really you right now? It does promise a much more fluid and maybe, just maybe, more secure experience than static credentials ever could.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting. Maybe scary interesting. If AI is the gatekeeper to your digital life, what happens when that gatekeeper is compromised? You know, this great power, greater responsibility thing kicks in hard here.
This raises a completely fundamental new risk. Instead of just stealing your password, an attacker might try to steal, well, you, or at least a convincing digital imitation of you.
How would that even work?
They could potentially train a model using data about you, maybe leaked data, maybe scraped from public profiles, your writing, your known communication style, to imitate you so convincingly that the AI identity system thinks they are you.
Wow. So they're not just phishing your credentials anymore, they're phishing your actual persona.
Precisely. And an identity linked deeply to AI offers attackers a much wider pivot point. It's behavioral, it's contextual, and it's potentially much harder to untangle or even dispute than a traditional credential breach. How do you prove the AI mimic isn't you if it acts just like you?
And the ways to attack this, it's not just about deepfakes trying to replicate your behavior, is it?
No, the attack surface expands hugely. We're talking about risks from insiders within the AI companies themselves, maybe people deliberately poisoning the training data to create hidden vulnerabilities.
Or adversarial machine learning, like systems specifically designed to fool the AI validator.
Exactly. Even physical attacks like creating hyper-realistic 3D masks to fool facial recognition components, or really sophisticated social engineering designed to trick the system, maybe even bypassing signals meant to detect if you're acting under duress.
Okay, to really get a handle on how big a jump this is, the source material offered a useful comparison, right, between traditional systems and these potential AI-based ones.
Yeah, it helps clarify the shift. Think of traditional systems. Those identity providers or IDPs, they rely on static stuff. Usernames, passwords, maybe that 2FA code. They might use a large but ultimately fixed set of data points about you.
Meta, for example, the source estimated uses over 20,000 data points.
Something like that, yeah. A lot, but still defined points. Recovery. Usually that frustrating password reset loop we all hate.
Oh, yes.
Detection is mostly based on spotting login anomalies, someone logging in from a weird place maybe. And appeals if you get locked out. Usually manual, incredibly slow, and often feels like shouting into the void.
Okay, so that's traditional. Now contrast that with these AI-based IDPs.
Right. They're using those dynamic behavioral and contextual cues we talked about, potentially leveraging like 100,000 plus patterns, maybe more. They're constantly contextualizing your behavior in real time.
Pulling in multimodal signals like voice, typing speed, writing style, even sentiment analysis.
Exactly. Building what you could almost call an LLM-shaped profile of a predictive model of how you act and communicate.
And recovery methods for this.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Completely unclear right now. Maybe some kind of complex behavioral reauthentication. An AI-driven appeal layer you have to convince. Who knows?
Detection is through that real-time interaction profiling.
Right. And appeal processes. Totally undefined. Likely needing some complex mix of human and AI oversight, which sounds challenging.
And this move to deep profiling, essentially building an AI clone of your behavior that opens up massive new risks, especially that identity emulation thing where someone reconstructs a model of you.
That's the big one, yeah.
This brings us to what I think is one of the most critical points, maybe the most critical point from the sources. What happens when you change? We already know how much of a nightmare account recovery can be today, even with simple passwords.
Exactly. But if your digital identity becomes tied to how you are, what happens if how you are fundamentally changes?
What kind of changes?
Well, think about major life events. What if you suffer a stroke or develop a neurological disorder like Parkinson's? Experience significant trauma that changes your affect. Start taking medication that subtly alters your responses, your typing speed, your emotional tone, or simply age.
Any of those could change how you speak, type, move, interact in ways the AI system trained on your past self might no longer recognize as you.
Precisely. How can a system designed to validate a persistent pattern handle that kind of genuine, legitimate human change?
The source really emphasized this, didn't it? Pointing out that neurodivergent users, people with disabilities, or even just people going through temporary life changes, maybe high stress, illness might interact in ways that constantly challenge these automated systems built on a specific normal pattern.
Which highlights the absolute urgent necessity for compassionate and frankly accessible routes for appeal and recovery.
Because the barriers to getting your digital identity back, or just proving who you are when your behavior shifts, they grow exponentially in this potential AI world.
Totally. Imagine a convincing spoofed LLM model of you arguing with the system that it's the real you. Appeals processes could be even slower and more inconsistent than they are now. There are basically no standards for revoking a compromised AI identity across different services, and your own legitimate life events could suddenly make you look like an attacker to the algorithm.
So the source material argues we need a blueprint for recovery and something it calls digital compassion. What does that actually mean?
It means clear, defined protocols for revoking a compromised identity and revalidating the real you, even if you've changed. It might mean developing cross-platform trust registries, ways to securely link your evolving behavior patterns back to a validated, real-world individual.
And critically, human fallbacks.
Absolutely critical. Guaranteed human oversight and intervention for people whose lives and interactions inevitably change. Systems have to be designed anticipating human fragility, human evolution. If digital identity is truly based on how you are, it must be designed to adapt when you inevitably change.
That's a profound design and ethical challenge. It feels like we're not really talking about that enough yet.
Not nearly enough, no. The focus is often on the tech's capabilities, not its failure modes or its human impact.
So, given all this complexity and risk, what can you, the listener, actually do right now? It feels a bit overwhelming.
It does, but there are steps. The source offers some practical advice. First, just stay vigilant. Pay attention to any unusual activity associated with your important accounts. That's still basic good practice.
An advocate.
Yes. Start asking the companies providing your online services, your bank, your email, your social media, about their plans for AI identity. Specifically, ask what their recovery and appeals processes will look like if something goes wrong, or if your behavior changes significantly. Put the pressure on them now.
Educate others too, especially within your organization.
Definitely. Raise awareness about the growing risks of AI impersonation, deepfake phishing attempts. Make sure people understand this isn't science fiction anymore. And keep practicing good digital hygiene, strong, unique passwords, multi-factor authentication wherever possible, carefully reviewing permissions you grant to any AI tools. Those things still matter, even as the landscape shifts.
Should people get involved in standards groups if that's their area?
Absolutely. If you work in tech, security, policy, your perspective is needed to help shape how these recovery and appeal mechanisms are designed. We need diverse voices in that conversation.
And on a more personal level, planning your digital legacy, that becomes even more critical, doesn't it?
Hugely. Who accesses your accounts, your digital self, if you're incapacitated or pass away? Most current systems barely address this for traditional accounts, let alone an AI-based behavioral identity. Document your wishes, use any legacy features services offer, however limited they are now, and have clear conversations with trusted contacts.
It feels like, despite some early efforts, maybe things like LLM watermarking to spot AI-generated text, or the development of decentralized identity systems like DIDs and VCs.
Yeah, those are emerging.
But robust solutions specifically for AI identity theft and recovery are still very much in their infancy. There isn't a universal playbook out there yet for how you reclaim your digital self if an LLM version of you gets cloned and starts acting on your behalf.
No, there really isn't.
Yeah.
And while regulatory frameworks are starting to develop globally, we see the EU AI Act, guidance from the UK's NCSC, work from the Council of Europe, updates to IIs in Europe, efforts like the US NIST risk management framework, the White House executive order.
So there's activity.
There's activity, yes.
Yes.
But there's still no universal standard or agreed upon international protocol for handling AI-based identity compromise or recovery. There's simply no clear established way right now to invalidate a cloned LLM version of yourself that's out there convincingly mimicking you across different platforms.
Which brings us squarely to the profound challenges that industry and regulators really need to tackle. This isn't just about building cool tech. It's about how it functions safely and fairly in the real world, for real people.
Exactly. The source material highlights several critical gaps that are just, well, they're not really being solved yet. For example, how do we ensure these systems are truly inclusive? How do they work fairly for neurodiverse individuals, people with disabilities, or just the aging population whose interaction patterns might naturally differ or change over time?
And what legal frameworks do we urgently need for things like digital legacy and succession when your identity is tied to your behavior, not just a password you can hand over?
Can these systems truly be made resilient against determined insider threats, sophisticated adversarial attacks, or deliberate model poisoning? Will regulation actually keep pace, especially internationally, or will we have a fragmented mess?
The source points to 6 key areas industry absolutely must address, right? What were they again?
Yeah, 6 critical gaps. One was transparent decisions and redress. Big one. If your access is denied by an AI, can you even find out why? Will there be a truly fair, human-overseen appeals process? Or is it just a computer says, no, black box?
We need explainability, and ideally, it needs to be mandated by regulation.
Makes sense. What's number 2?
Cross-provider portability. Losing access to your main AI IDP, maybe the one provided by your phone OS or a big tech company, shouldn't lock you out of your entire digital life. That's terrifying. It's like losing your only passport and having no way to get a new one or prove who you are anywhere else.
So we need open, interoperable standards.
Desperately. Standards for moving your digital identity, including robust recovery and revocation procedures that work across different services, not just within one company's walled garden.
Okay, third, the ongoing challenge of adversarial threats, insider risks, and supply chain security. AI IDPs might raise the bar for simple attacks, but they introduce these really complex new supply chain vulnerabilities, manipulated models, rogue insiders. We need comprehensive audit trails, mandatory third-party review of these systems, continuous integrity checks, much higher level of assurance needed.
Fourth gap.
Coercion and consent signals. This one's tricky. How did these systems reliably differentiate between your authentic behavior and behavior under duress? Say, someone forcing you to log in. This opens the door to potential abuse by employers, governments, even in domestic situations. We need clear frameworks for consent, reliable handling of duress signals, maybe proof-of-life mechanisms, and these need to be developed openly, ideally with input from civil society and human rights groups.
Right, not just by the tech companies themselves. Fifth.
This ties into global human rights and digital citizenship. If access to essential services, jobs, communication, even participation in society increasingly requires this type of advanced digital identity, then being excluded because the AI doesn't recognize you or you can't recover your account, that creates a kind of digital statelessness.
Wow, digital statelessness. That's a powerful term.
It is. The ability to have a secure digital identity, to recover it if it's lost or stolen, and to appeal unfair decisions that arguably needs to be treated as a fundamental human right in the 21st century.
And the final gap, number 6.
Back to legacy and inheritance. As we mentioned, there's just no consensus on managing your AI persona, that digital self built on your unique patterns if you die or become incapacitated. We need clear, compassionate, legally sound processes for digital succession that respect individual wishes and protect against misuse after someone's gone.
These aren't small technical tweaks, are they? They require fundamental shifts in design principles, ethics, and legal frameworks.
Absolutely. To ensure this incredibly powerful technology actually serves humanity, rather than making us more vulnerable or locking us into digital boxes.
So what does all of this truly mean for you listening right now? The source material uses a really powerful phrase to describe the appeal of AI identity. It calls it a beautiful trap.
That resonates.
Think about it, effortless sign-ins, a world that just intuitively knows you, maybe anticipates your needs before you even ask. It's incredibly seductive, isn't it?
Who wouldn't want that on the surface? But the deeper you integrate your core identity into a complex, potentially opaque system like this, the harder it becomes to extract yourself, to leave, or even just to change authentically.
When your AI becomes your ID, being locked out isn't just a technical headache like forgetting a password. It's potentially existential. You could literally be locked out of your digital self, the sum total of your online interactions and presence.
If the system malfunctions, if it forgets the real you because you went through a rough patch or developed a tremor, or worse, if it confuses you for a convincing mimic built from your own digital ghost, what recourse will you really have in a world that increasingly relies on that AI validator?
The ultimate danger here isn't just the technical dependence, is it? It feels like it's the potential for surrendering your fundamental right to change, to grow, to redefine yourself online, or simply to recover when things inevitably go wrong in life.
And that brings us to that really provocative thought for you to consider as we wrap up this deep dive. When your AI becomes your ID, the question isn't just, can it prove who I am?
It's, will it still recognize me when I'm no longer the same?
And maybe even more important,
Will it let me become someone new?
something to chew on for sure. The future of digital identity is about so much more than convenience or security. It's about agency, resilience, and maybe our very humanity in this evolving digital age.
Definitely a lot to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.